It's always in the news. Cybercriminals attacking great organizations, wreaking havoc on the trust of their brand.
We socialize cybersecurity for you to raise awareness.
Interviewing leaders who built and protect great brands.
We help talented people enter into this incredible field, and we share our research at blockbuster true cybercrime stories.
This is Cybercrime Junkies. And now the show. Well, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies. I'm your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today, I'm very honored to be joined by Ron Werner, CISSP, CISM with over 2 decades of IT and security experience. He's a noted international consultant, keynote speaker, TEDx speaker, teacher, blogger, and absolute master in the data and cybersecurity industry. Ron, welcome to the studio, my friend.
Thank you for having me, David. Great to be here.
Well, we're very excited. So you hold a lot of different positions. I know you do work with Forrester Research, Cyber AAA. You're involved with VetSec. Why don't we just tell ladies and gentlemen kind of some of the aspects. Let's start with Forrester Research. So walk us through just briefly kind of what all you're doing for them.
So with Forrester Research, been there about a year, almost exactly. I'm part of their security and risk consulting team, helping large organizations as they're maturing their cybersecurity programs and practices, establishing benchmarks with assessments, through analysis, and then helping them determine how to continually improve. Also focusing on zero trust, because that's where zero trust started over a decade ago, was at Forrester. So it's a lot of organizations going beyond the buzzword of zero trust as they're trying to see how do we actually dive into the meat of how do we assume a breach? What does that mean for just-in-time access control? Having that continuous monitoring in place so we always know what's happening on our network. So never a dull moment in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. So let's touch base real quick. For those listeners that might be new to the segment or the topic, we do have some business owners that listen in, and they're interested in security or learning, but they don't always know all the terms. When we think about zero trust, how do we explain that in layman's terms?
So let's go back 10, 15 years. If you look at an old network, there used to be exterior and interior. Once you got inside, you can go anywhere, do anything.
Right.
So when John Kinderbach came up with zero trust, he realized that there was this crunchy exterior but soft, squishy interior. Well, now as we're webifying most applications, that is disappearing, particularly with the pandemic, where now we have anytime applications computing. Think about Microsoft 365, email and all the Office stuff. You can do that from anywhere, almost any type of device.
So it's not
zero trust in access.
And having access to everything, right?
Right, but limiting access to just what you need to do your job. It's the idea or principle of least privilege. Too many people have access to way too much stuff, and they get in trouble with it. So keeping that as minimal as possible keeps everyone safer and saner.
Yeah, that it's really an important concept too, because we've seen in recent breaches, one employee has been breached, but then they're able to reach the source code of something, and you're like, that user was not even supposed to have access to that, but they were able to socially engineer or do multi-factor authentication fatigue, whatever the tactic was to gain control. But it's about it's how things are configured and the access once they get in.
Right. Once you can impersonate someone else's access, particularly if they're an administrator. We see this with the DoD top secret breaches, where system administrators have access to top secret documents. Now, I'm former Air Force. I had a TS clearance, etc. You stay away from that stuff.
Right.
Now, you don't go towards it. If you shouldn't see it, you don't want to see it. But that's self-inflicted least privilege, but a lot of people, they see power with it. So it's just, we call it keep yourself off the suspect list. if you don't have access to something, you can't be blamed if something happens to it,
That's
right?
and especially in the days of massive breaches, right? You don't want to have access to a lot of stuff.
You don't want your name to be associated with the conduit in. So,
Yes.
it's a little bit more painful as a user not having access to something to help you do your job. But the idea of you have it when you need it and then it goes away when you don't.
Yep.
Again, for
That's
sanity's
excellent.
sake.
Yeah. And then Cyber AAA.
Yes.
Please explain what that is
Mhm.
and what some of the great work that you guys are doing there.
Certainly. So it's just my own consulting practice. Started up like 5 years ago when I had a lot of companies ask me for help. Actually, had a buddy of mine give me a lot of his business because he wanted to retire. Go figure. So it's cybersecurity assessments, advising, and awareness. Where go in performing assessments for and with them focusing more on small medium businesses, those who don't always have the funds to do the extensive cybersecurity
Really important.
analysis.
Really
Yes.
important, right? Most businesses in the US are small to mid-sized businesses. So,
Exactly. So, and then tying it back to the advising, acting as a trusted advisor. So, being that person who will give you a pragmatic approach to solving problems,
yeah.
addressing business risks. And then a lot of what I do is just awareness. So, David, I'm a teacher at heart.
Hmm.
I still teach for a university. A lot of what I do as a consultant is just try to teach others how to best use the resources they have at hand.
Yeah. And to put it in practical terms,
Mhm.
business operational terms, right? So often, especially in the cybersecurity field, they get lost in the technologies or in
Mhm.
the acronyms and in the confusing aspects of it. But really, what executives and what business owners care about is what does this mean to production?
Mhm.
What does this mean to revenue? What does this mean to operations? Right?
Yes.
Um,
How much will it
really,
cost me? So
right,
it's one of the things we recommend for those entering cybersecurity career field is learn business. Take an
right.
economics class, a finance type of a class.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because and the importance of making an internal business case,
Yes.
right?
And then
Like being
translating
able
to
to state
technology.
your case to stakeholders, to be able to
Mhm.
say why a certain service or technology would have value.
Let me share a quick story. I was actually
Absolutely.
working defense contractor and this was all part of the controlled unclassified information CMMC
Hmm.
capability maturity model certification now 800-171. Anyway, going into a small defense contractor, subcontractor, and they were wondering why are we spending so much on our network? And I could tell the network admin never talked to the CFO. They happened to be in the room. CFO asked, "So why am I spending all of this money?" Well, let's look to see where everyone is going. Network admin showed, YouTube, Facebook, Netflix. CFO had a minor little cow,
Mm,
but it caught the attention then because then realized, for financial sake, we can also add better cybersecurity practices.
right.
So it's tying that licensing. Are you overpaying for licenses?
Sure.
Why do you want to have a standard version? Yeah, it makes patching easier, but also saves money for licensing. So more examples, more when we can tie the technical with the business operations, I see a lot more success.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then one of the other organizations you
Mhm.
are involved in is VetSec. So
Yes.
veteransec.org. We'll have
Mhm.
links to all of these in the show notes. So please, we encourage all listeners and
Mhm.
viewers to please check those out. But walk us through the mission of VetSec and what all you're doing
Sure.
there.
So, Veterans of Cybersecurity is a nonprofit group, and we're military, active duty veterans, and worldwide too. It's not just those within the US, although that's the primary membership, where people are trying to transition. You probably have heard, David, there's this large gap. We don't have enough people to fill all of the different cybersecurity
Absolutely,
positions.
we talk about it all the time.
Yes. Well, being a veteran with a high clearance, I learned how to protect things at a very young age. Let me
Absolutely. Everybody, just wanted to mention Cybercrime Junkies Prime. We now have a subscription available through our podcast, and it offers exclusive content, bonus episodes, and even pre-releases of all of our standard shows.
We keep it simple. It's just the cost of 1 cup of coffee 1 time a month, and you can cancel anytime.
You can subscribe by scanning the QR code next to me in the video or by clicking the link in the show notes. If you select not to subscribe to our Prime membership, please at least consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. It's at Cybercrime Junkies Podcast on YouTube, and it's absolutely free. It allows us to bring great guests on the show. Thank you for your support, and now let's get back to it.
Young age. Let me
Absolutely.
can you tell my origin story real quick.
Absolutely, please do, because this is so important, because so many people, they outside of cybersecurity, there's a lot of veterans that struggle to get employment, and cybersecurity is a wonderful transition for military personnel.
It is
For a couple of reasons. One, the security clearance, the technical skills, the transferable skills, but also people that I find that are drawn to cybersecurity are drawn by a bigger mission. One, to serve and protect. And so that is right in hand with why you were in the military in the first place.
I loved how you put that, to serve and protect. That is exactly it. You build the security mindset. We were talking earlier about Bruce Schneier wrote about this 15 years ago. You know, having in your mind about what can go wrong and what do I need to do to prevent it, detect it, and respond appropriately to it. This is all ingrained, even if you're not a technician by trade. It's how you think. So I went through ROTC at Michigan State. Shameless plug there, go green.
Yep.
Anyway, I had a computer science degree. I was an intelligence officer back in the 90s. You combine those two, got me into the early days of information security.
Absolutely. Before it looked anything like it does today.
Right. Well, I was a Unix sysadmin before Linux.
Wow.
I developed my own security checklist mainly because I wanted to protect my own stuff. I didn't want anyone messing with my servers. So I figured out how to secure it, how to share that information. And then organizations said, hey, can you do this for networking, for Windows infrastructure, for applications? So it's just easily transferable skills from the military. And that's the idea with VetSec. We are a group that is passionate about building other veterans, brothers and sisters of arms, who are looking to transition or just keep developing their career within technology or cybersecurity.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And what a great cause too.
Yes, it is. And we do build each other. We help each other through multiple aspects, whether it's resume reviews, practice interviews, job leads, even mental health.
Okay, so we were just talking about VetSec, and you were talking about mental health. And so let's continue on there.
So even though Mental Health Awareness Month is May, it's something we need to be always aware of with ourselves and with others. You know, what are we doing to look after ourselves? If you can see it with others as well, you see signs where they're beginning to feel stress.
Yeah.
You know, pulling them to the side, saying, okay, we're going to call it time out. You know, take time away from technology for a little while, like you did, David, as you went on your break. Yeah, this way we come back, we're refreshed, and we're energized.
Yeah, otherwise you just burn out, right? The same, because stressors and things like that seem to be all in how you absorb it, right?
Yes.
Like it's you can handle the same scenario, and if you're in a good mental space, right, you're fine, right? It rolls right off. And if life is overwhelming you, even a little thing can just overwhelm you.
Yes,
so
exactly.
So true.
You know,
it's so true.
Common groups like VetSec, there's multiple others. You can do it within the security community, whether it's ISACA, ISC squared, ISSA. I mean, these are all good communities to be a part of, to build your career and build yourself.
Absolutely. So, you know, being in the cybersecurity community, like all communities, there are events and there are conferences, and the cybersecurity conferences are always colorful as a good way of calling them, like,
Mhm.
not just DEF CON, right? But even RSA and some of the others.
Mhm.
And you were at RSA, you had a presentation on influence, and it
Yes.
addressed some new approaches in social engineering. So we would love to hear about that. So first of all, what is influence? And then let's talk about these new approaches in social engineering.
So, influence are the good and bad side of influence. If you
Hmm.
look at the quintessential leadership in books like How to Win Friends and Influence People,
Hmm.
from the 1930s, people think, well, it's old. Still, the ideas are the same and are often repeated in
Not that
modern
much has
authors.
changed. This is kind of an
No,
electronic version of what's been going on for a while, right?
exactly. It's how do you connect with others?
Right.
Particularly over this type of a medium. It's gotten to be a little more challenging. How do you read, micro expressions? If you read that, the
Hmm.
little expressions people may use to you can if they're confused or something. So my talk on influence goes through all of these different aspects on more of the interpersonal or soft side of cybersecurity and how we need to be leveraging that in order to influence decision making. So, David, I did a study for The Economist magazine, partly sponsored by Oracle. It was like 3 or 4 years ago when I was full time at the university. And we were talking to CISOs. From that
Hmm.
study, we realized that there's two common challenges they have. One being able to prioritize risks. I mean, there's
Right.
just so many cyber risks. Which one do we go after?
Right.
The other common challenge is how do we influence decision making within the business? Going
Right.
back to those business skills.
Yeah.
So,
Internal business case, right?
yes. So it's using these different types of influence or the negative side being influence. So influence is more of the manipulation of it. Influence is more of the positive reinforcement. How do we get people to arrive at decisions that we've already made, but on their own, for
Right.
example? A story I would go when I worked for a Fortune 200 company, go and just join different meetings.
Hmm.
I'd make sure, that some would apply, but I was being part of the cybersecurity team. They'd be general IT meetings. I wouldn't have to say very much because just being a presence in the room get them thinking about security, and they
Oh,
would
really?
come up.
So
Yeah.
there'd be an IT meeting, and they'd be talking about a server refresh or whatever it is, and then you'd be there, and then all of a sudden somebody would bring up, well, how are we going to secure this down? What about access to the data? Things that they start thinking about that because you're in the room.
Yes. Yep, in the room
Wonderful
where it
social
happens.
experiment. That's a
Yes.
really cool social experiment.
Well, they then own the decision, so it's not security telling you what to do, you're doing it for
Right.
compliance, they're doing it, again, to protect their stuff, preventing their own headaches is a phrase I'll sometimes use. Who
Yeah,
owns the headache? So, once you can determine who owns the headache, helping them derive ideas for how to solve it. So it's
absolutely.
simple techniques like that I share during my session that you can use, whether it's likability, approachability, building rapport, finding something in common with people. It's the same techniques that the evil hackers, threat actors will use to try to social engineer their way into an organization can also be used very positively to build and sell what we're doing for security.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. What are some of your findings, or what are some of your recommendations? Do you have any specific ones for any particular industries or size
Mhm,
organizations from the findings
mhm.
that you have?
So one is, well, keeping information security simple. KISS. Always about
Hmm.
simplifying. For example, and this being the Cybercrime Junkies podcast, how do we reduce phishing, social engineering? First of all, phishing will never go away. I'm
Right.
very convinced all of its forms we're going to still see. We still get junk mail and snail
Yep.
mail. So never go away. What do you do about it is just as important. So this is when I
Hmm.
tell my 90-year-old mom, if you see something, you say something. If your spidey senses are going off, you ask.
Hmm.
Hey, David, I just got an email from the IRS
Right,
saying that I didn't pay my 22 taxes. I know I did, but they said
right,
I have to click on this link. It looks just like the IRS.
right,
What do you think?
right. See
Just
something,
add
say something. I mean,
so
to me, it sounds simplistic, but to me, there's great levels of sophistication in simplicity because
there
it's
is.
very powerful. People try
Hmm.
and, they want to answer something in,
Hmm.
42-page dissertations. And I'm like, if you can't say it in 2 sentences, we don't understand it. Like,
Right.
it's got to boil down to, so, and
Hmm.
social engineering to me is often, if someone's asking you to do something that could potentially be
Hmm.
against your interest in a tight timeline, right?
Hmm.
Don't do it. Like, that's a red
Right.
flag. Like, go tell somebody about it. Just get another set of eyes on there, and a lot of adverse things can be avoided.
Exactly. And then to take from psychology, Daniel Kahneman's Nobel Prize winning book, Thinking Fast and Slow, moving from the fast brain, the emotional brain,
Hmm.
the amygdala, to the slower brain to process. Just the act of asking the question does that. It
It's
causes
exactly
that
just the
time out.
pausing, just the pausing
Yes.
allow,
Breathe.
because and we've had some neuroscientists on
Mhm.
this show, and they've told us that exact same thing, because
Mhm.
they've said, just the pause. Like, when you're caught up in the moment,
Mhm.
you can train somebody. Here's what to look for. Here's a red flag. These are all the
Mhm.
red flags of what a phishing email looks like. But when you're caught up in the moment, right, your brain biologically can't process that this
Mhm.
is a red flag. So always pausing, it allows your
Mhm.
brain to catch up, and allows the rational brain, the neocortex, to kind of take over and be able to then be, oh, this looks just like that one before. But when you're rushing through that, you
Yep.
have that amygdala hijack. You can't even process that that is what you're recognizing.
Yes. So just call a self timeout.
Yeah.
Nothing is that much of an emergency unless it's a life that's in jeopardy. I don't know of any lives in jeopardy where you have to click on a link to
No.
save a physical
Exactly.
life. Sorry.
Yeah.
You
And the
know,
IRS is not going to do something, nor will Microsoft, within 24 hours ever.
no, or
Like,
the
no one's going to
FBI
shut off
or
access within 24 hours.
right. Yeah. No,
No.
and yeah, maybe if you're a first responder that but even them they
Yes.
are physically there and they know what to do. Yeah, and if you watch when they come onto a scene, they always assess.
Yes.
They'll go and they'll scope out, but they
They'll
know how to
assess
do it
first.
right. They
Yeah.
perform recon. This is hacking
Hmm.
101, by the way. What's the first
Yeah.
step of hacking? Recon. Look
Right.
around. What is around me? What do I need to know? What information do I need to know? Gives our brain a chance to process and then turn to somebody else and ask if you're not sure. And this is for viewers. Yeah, don't worry about, I'm asking the stupid question. There is no such thing. I fully believe that, as a professor, I love it when students ask questions. I've done this with my daughter. She once had a question about a math class. I'm like, did you ask the teacher? I didn't want to appear stupid. I'm like, Kat, you were born with my big mouth. Ask. If you have a question, someone else will. Um, and that's true. So we're talking earlier about acronyms. So if someone says
Yep.
a TLA you don't know, ask because
Hmm.
there's so many three-letter acronyms out there. Those
Absolutely.
and that's also one of the techniques I use working with the business is explaining quickly, interpreting. Um, do you watch comedians, David, like Fat and
Always.
Fluffy?
Always.
So
Yes.
watch him how he does translation between Spanish and English flawlessly.
And who is this again? Who?
Gabriel Iglesias,
Oh,
known
of
as
course.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
hilarious, love him.
Yes. Hilarious.
He tells you, "I'm gonna be speaking Spanish, but don't worry, I'll be translating," and it's just
Yes.
very natural, you don't even realize it. We can do the
Yes.
same thing with our tech terms, when we're
Oh, I
talking about
love that analogy. That's a
a
really interesting
SIM, you just say,
analogy.
with a SIM, security incident event management,
Right.
logging system, and then you explain then you just continue your sentence, you just provide a quick 5-second
Right.
translation.
We're looking for weird stuff. We're searching
Right.
for anomalies, right? That's all it
Yep.
is, right?
Yes.
Stuff that just, like, it raises your spidey senses when you see data moving
Yes.
from Omaha to Pakistan in the middle of the night. Something's up. We need to
Yes.
alert, right? It's
Yeah.
some, Yeah. Interesting. So interesting.
So yeah, and so keeping it very conversational as you're
Yeah.
speaking, it can be hard for more of the technical crowd to do. Finding personal analogies, telling stories. So I did this again for a large company. Bring Your Kid to Work Day gave a presentation on protecting kids online.
Oh yeah. Always a big challenge. I mean, especially in the days of TikTok and
Yes,
everything, and it's
social
really a challenge.
media alive
Yeah.
and well. Yeah, I actually asked my son when he was 13, do you have any friends online you don't know? And our age, of course, we knew all of our friends. How many friends do
Right.
you have now that you really don't know if they're really your friend or not? Anyway, um,
Well, and with
the
kids
real,
too. I mean, like
yeah,
the bullies used to just be on the playground. Well, now
yeah,
they're in their bedroom with them at 1 o'clock in the morning if they have their phone in there, right? Like
trolls
they
can
could
be
be,
any
yeah, they could be cyber bullied while we're asleep.
right, and it's just learning how to step away from it. So, quick
Hmm.
tip: if you're feeling, again, if you see something,
See
say
something. I
something.
was just about
Talk
to say, see
about it.
something, say something, right?
Yes, don't feel we are not alone. That can
Hmm.
be daunting, but it's also very empowering
Right.
knowing that there's a lot of support available out there. But what I did in teaching child safety online, I was actually talking to the parents on how to protect the computers at work. I just didn't phrase it that way because I knew they protect their kids.
Right.
Same ideas apply.
Hmm.
In terms of if you see a weird link, double check it. Making sure you're using strong credentials. Now moving to multi-factor authentication, you know, because passwords are just such a weak form of proving identity. Staying up to date on patches. Those simple. How many times do we keep saying these simple things, David? Where it's just Groundhog Day.
Everybody
It's
keeps saying, like, I don't know why we need to be trained on how to spot a phishing email, etc., because we know that it's so basic. It's like, and yet statistically, nobody's learning it, right?
right.
And
Well,
yet
there's
it's
just
still a major issue.
There's new mechanisms for it. It's not just through
Yeah.
email anymore. It
Right.
can be, someone friends you on TikTok or your social media sends
Yeah.
you a link. You get a link through a text message. I have a term I call wishing, webinar phishing.
Mm.
I hop on a Discord, Slack channel, or some webinar, and then build the trust through the beginning of the webinar, and then submit my evil links. Could
Yep.
that be used as a conduit? I only need to trick one person. So if that
Wow.
works,
Yeah. Wishing. That's an interesting one, too.
yeah. So it's just a
Yeah.
new form of the old technique, is all it is.
Sure. And then there's jobs. A lot of people are out there looking for a lot of layoffs lately. A lot of people are out there
Hmm.
looking for work. There's a lot of resumes flying around with malicious
Hmm.
links in them, and so HR is getting hit. There's
Yes.
there's a lot of that going on too.
Oh, most definitely. So it's just being aware who you're sharing your information with. I mean, yeah, you announce or you put open for work on LinkedIn, all of a
Mhm.
sudden you could be getting messages from all over the world
Oh
and
yeah.
not
And
all of
some
them.
jobs are real sound really good to be true, right?
Yes, but they could
Yeah.
be money mules. Look
Mhm.
up what the FBI says about being a money mule. Hey, do you want to work? Do you want to work remote? All you have to do is repackage. You can do it whatever
Right.
time you want, not
That was a
realizing.
whole warning that they issued
Yes,
just a few months back. There was also the warning about deepfake,
yes.
right? People applying for remote jobs using deepfake technologies to get those
Hmm.
jobs, and then they don't even have to hack the company; they could just get right in, right? Because
Right.
during onboarding, they give them access, and
Hmm.
as AI and as deepfake technologies develop, it's going to be more and more
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah, you
So
can create a whole persona based on a whole lot of fake information. So it's
yeah,
again proving identity, cycling back to zero trust. Which
I was just about to do that because it really gets into what are the rules, right? Because there's all
Mhm,
these different standards out there and there's no concrete set. And I know the US government issued their US strategy recently, and it was interesting because it was different than the last few that have been out there. And
mhm,
this one talked about offensive movements as well as like preemptive strikes, and then also holding certain product vendors or service vendors liable, which is interesting. It's interesting that they said it. Now, what'll be interesting is what legislation happens, like what
Yes.
actually comes from this.
How do you begin
What
enforcement?
is your take on what do you think could come, and what do you think might be likely to come?
Well, I think it's great we're now seeing leadership and direction from US federal government. I know not
Mhm,
everyone will agree with me. Not as and they do have the mandates for federal agencies. The rest
mhm,
of us can follow them as guidelines. For example, NIST, National Institute of Standards
mhm.
and Technology, has all of their special publications required for federal agencies, but you'll find organizations worldwide are now using them just as, hey, this is a sound approach to follow. It's
Exactly.
Grace Hopper said long time ago, if you remember Grace Hopper, one of the
Mhm.
luminaries of computer science, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
the wonderful thing about standards is there are so many of them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I I wanna do it this way. Well, this standard it violates this standard. Well, let's find a different standard, right? You just
right.
find and so you really want to find one that has
Mhm,
credibility, that is also executable on, right? You can still operate
exactly.
within it.
And
No.
not being so beholden to it where you're stuck in compliance.
Right.
Too
Well, and that gets
many.
to the whole debate. Let me ask you this, a very
Mhm.
simple question. The difference between security and compliance, what is your take?
So I once asked my boss this difference between security and audit, which I see being very similar.
Right.
So
It is.
security is more proactive, forward looking. Compliance is more reactive, backward looking. Are we
Right.
doing what we said we would do? Security tries to understand future risks. How do we prevent future issues? Yeah, and gets into that whole risk based science where compliance is more of that checklist mentality. Are you doing this and can we prove it? So it's
Right.
also the difference between an assessment and an audit. I say all auditors are from Missouri. Why do I say that? Missouri is the show me state. So you have to
That's
provide the
great.
proof. Yeah, with an audit or compliance.
Yeah.
You can't just say, okay, yeah, we're doing zero trust. Okay,
Yeah.
prove it. Yeah, where's your
Right.
evidence? And that often can be the challenge too, is how do you show you are reaching a particular level of maturity or you have a control in place? Or if you don't have a control in place, you have compensating actions. Um,
Mhm.
Let me share a quick story. I often share this one. This
Absolutely.
was an international hotel chain I worked with. And about 6 years ago, Windows 7 was still a thing, believe it or not. They
Oh, yeah,
had
no. I
a
know. It was still
critical app on Windows
yeah,
7, not even a service pack.
right.
And they said, we can't update it, this app. We need an exception that we don't have to update. Can you grant it to us? Long story short, yes. And everyone's freaking, but it says thou shalt patch. Okay, it comes down to questions are you asking? So, what is the app? It was like a room utilization rate. So, there was no
Oh,
personally identifiable information,
okay.
nothing super sensitive or proprietary for the company, but it was used by numerous analysts, like five. How many analysts? Five internal people.
But when Windows 7 went end of life, they weren't able to keep getting the patching and the security frameworks built into it.
Right. But do you always need it? No, we were able to
Right.
use zero trust at the time, segregated microsegmentation
Mhm.
on the network, but at multiple levels, not just at
Right.
the network, at the access level, at the application
So
level.
even if there was a compromise, it couldn't do any harm,
Right. Yep.
and
And it would be
that's the key.
limited. Yep.
That's the
Limit the
key.
blast radius. It would just have been that
Right.
server, known risk. So it's just quantifying the risks, and coming to that business decision point, coming back to how do we discuss this with the business owners?
I was just about
And
to say, so that's an exception. That's a risky thing to do, right? Allow
mhm,
something that is going to remain on systems that are outdated at the like
mhm,
in light of the end of life of Windows 7. But so long as you can configure it right, it makes
yes,
perfect sense. It makes
mhm,
perfect business, operational sense, no harm, no foul, right? Like you're
right,
able to be like, look, worst case scenario, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to blast down there. It'll be
mhm,
limited down there, and that's it.
yeah,
So that's a
yeah.
brilliant move. It was a great
Well, and
move. That should be a story you share on a podcast. Oh, you just
Oh,
did.
yes.
You just did. No, that's really good. Like, I love hearing stories like that, because that's a great example of implementing security the right way.
Compromising
The balance.
with security.
Yeah.
Being willing, because again, compliance tends to be, well, we say we have to do this. And I've done this during an IRS audit for a financial organization, and they came back and, no, you need to do this for IRS, 1075, and there was no compromise there. And if you actually follow all of the rules, you can brick a box. Looks like I just lost you.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Yep.
1 second. Sorry, my machine just went to sleep. I've been talking so much.
Okay.
Anyway, so if you follow all of like the CIS benchmarks or the DoD security technical implementation guides, you can accidentally over-secure a system to where it's not operational.
Right. Yeah.
So
you can over-secure a business to where it's not operational, right?
Right.
And that's the whole thing that I keep searching. I keep searching for the holy grail in security. And to me, it's a case-by-case basis, because we can't be the mayors of the town of no, right? We can't just say, no, we can't do this. No, we can't do this. No, we have to find a way to make it happen. But that's part of the reason why I love the zero trust methodology and the framework, is because you're able to segment that, like you did in that one app for the hotel chain.
Or like you need FTP, the old protocol for file transfer.
Yeah.
Someone needs to transfer files. Well, first of all, that is an old, archaic way of doing it. But again, okay, fine. If you want to do something that's insecure, we're going to treat you like the rest of the internet.
Right.
Yeah, and just assume that you can be compromised, limiting what can happen. It's like learning from other fields. And this is maybe one of the parting thoughts I want to leave the cybercrime junkies, is that let's stop thinking of cybersecurity as only cyber problems. You were asking earlier, like, I'm looking cybersecurity like the automobile industry of the 1950s and 60s, before all of the safety and security controls. You asked about the federal government. They now hold auto manufacturers liable if there's a known defect.
Right.
We're just taking that model and moving it into the cyber realm. About time.
Well, and that gets into one of the last questions I want to ask you, and that is, what role or where do you see the cyber insurance industry playing in this? Because, I saw let me tell you a quick story. I saw a video from a commercial. It was actually an interview when they were starting to require people to wear seatbelts. And they interviewed these people. I don't know if they were in Kansas or in the Midwest, but they had a beer in the car and they were like complaining. I can't believe after a hard day work, I have to start wearing a seatbelt now. Next, they're going to tell me I can't have a cold one when I'm driving. It's like, oh my God, we've come a long way, right?
Yes.
And the data supported, just like the data supports some modifications in security, right? Links, please reach out to Ron on LinkedIn and check out all of his work. All of the links are in the show notes. Thank you very much, sir. Have a great evening. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you all.
Hey, well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. Our next episode starts right now.
Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. And download the podcast episodes, available everywhere you get podcasts.
To support our show and get exclusive pre-release episodes and bonus content, please subscribe to Cybercrime Junkies Prime.
Link in the description and show notes. And thanks for being a cybercrime junkie.